Hello and welcome to the table. And today we're going to be covering Fleet Commander Nimitz from DVG. I've been wanting to do this game for a long time, but and I've had this game for a long time. The big thing with this one is that there was a massive expansion that just came out from the Kickstarter. And so I've been just waiting and waiting, and it finally arrived, yay! And one of the things about this game is that it's probably one of my favorite we call them the field commander games. So there's for example, there's Alexander, there's a Napoleon one. I know I'm missing another one in there. Rommel. There's a Rommel one. And they're usually called Field Commander. This one's called Fleet Commander, which is a similar vein. I really loved this game, except it was extremely random. Like, there was just a whole bunch of dice rolling, and the Japanese fleets would just move into all these different places. They do have some good, AI that the Japanese fleets aren't going to move, very stupidly, but it was still, and the game was challenging. But the other thing was it was missing a full campaign that went from 1942 to 1945. They did have some basic rules, but anyways, those were my complaints. And I remember talking to Kevin Verson about this game. Let me stop here. If you're here for the playthrough, go to video 2. If you're here for me chatting like I am right now and some setup rules, stick around. So anyways, I was talking to Kevin Verson, and I don't know him personally. I'm just talking like Facebook chat. He's a really cool guy, by the way. So I gave him this feedback that I really wish that the Japanese fleets would move around as an actual fleet, like a carrier group, instead of, because what would happen sometimes is, these different locations on the board, the fleets move around, and it could be possible that a Japanese carrier can be isolated and all by itself, and just easy pickings, right? So a year or so passes, and then they announce this expansion, and one of the expansions is there now is carrier fleets, which is awesome. Kevin, if you're ever watching this, you're an awesome guy, and I don't know if I'm the reason that they did this, but I am going to take credit for it because I definitely asked for it. So what do I have here? I have the Fleet Commander basic game, but I have also all the expansions now that go with it. So for this playthrough, we are going to go over the expansions, but I will talk about the basic rules when I can. So if you have just the base game, I can help you out. Actually, the largest differences between the two is really the setup. But once you get into the actual gameplay, there's not that much variation, although we are going to be doing the full campaign from 1942 to 1945, and that does cause some more variation from the base game. So what do we got besides the base game? The first thing is that this board, with the expansion, or the upgrade kit, if you will, is different. You should notice that there's a new resupply table here that's going to be very different from the basic board. And I didn't recognize too many other changes, but that's the big change with the board. So a new mounted board. You're going to see new setup sheets. The original setup sheets was actually like mounted cardboard. Now they're just paper. Slightly lower quality. I guess you could nitpick and say that that's not good, but it is a nice quality paper. It's like a photo paper. Anyways, it's good enough for government work. You just need it for setup. Now, here's what's crazy. Because of the expansion we're going to play, we're not even going to use these, but I just wanted to point out that the upgrade kit has new setup sheets, and if you were to set up your game, just to do a base game, you would use this sheet, for example, to set up 1942, or a different sheet to set up 1943. The way the base game is set up in this is that you just play 1 year, and then you have objectives, which are listed here, And if you control, a number of those objectives, if you control all of them, you get a great rating, and so forth. So, or if you control 8 of these listed objectives, you have a great rating. If you control 4 of them, blah, blah, blah. So if you control 3 or less, you're replaced. So normally you just play 1 year and that's it. The game's over. Now they do have, like I said, some basic rules in the rule book about linking campaigns. It's like at the very end here. You can see that they have like link campaigns where you can do this. But really all it is you're just basically playing 4 games of this and then adding up your score. That's all this is telling you to do. There's nothing magic. So if you sank all their carriers in 1942, those carriers are going to reappear in 1943 because because you're just basically resetting up the game and playing again. So it's not quite as thematic, if you will, but that's the basic gist of this. And so so on your turn, you're going to do various things and try to control the different objectives in the game. And the objectives, of course, are denoted here on the board. And the way you do that is, of course, you go to a place and you do battle, and then eventually you can maybe take control of the territory. Now, these little lines that you see here, they're meant for supply. So if, for example, Japan controls the Gilbert Islands and the Marshall Islands, and it would be really hard for you to trace supply to maybe the Caroline Islands, so you can't go deep into Japan territory without controlling, these basic spots first, because you need to be able to draw supply. And I know I'm brushing over some rules extremely quickly, but that's the basic gist of the game. Now, there's a lot of tiles and counters in this game. As you can see here, what I did was I have them listed as USA 1942 and Japan 1942. So these are infantry and land-based aircraft counters, and they are unique to only the 1942 campaign. And you can see here I have 1943, 1944, and 1945 already sorted and laid out. I highly recommend you do the same. And then the ship counters, you can see the ship counters are going to be, that's a 1944 Japanese destroyer group. So these would only come out in the 1944 campaign. Now, be very careful. When I use the word campaign, that's each of the years is considered a campaign. We're going to play the grand campaign, which is all the years linked together, okay? But we're not going to do the basic rules where we just play them. Let's talk about the expansions real quick. The first expansion is the war expansion. And so this is a really awesome one. But what this does is this allows me to link all the campaigns together, or all the years together. So here you can see there's one sheet for each year of the war. You set up the game as normal in 1942, and then you just play through all the way to 1945. I mean, there's a lot more stuff here I'm not going to read, but that's the basic gist. So you're actually playing one fluid game, okay? The other thing is, so like when you're trying to resolve battles in the various places, those battles are resolved on an island map, which is probably the most ingenious part of this game. They have a way to represent the carriers are out in the ocean, and then you have coastal fleets, and then you actually have land battles going on, and everything can interact with everything else. You can launch planes from your carriers to help out with the island battle, or you can do carrier-to-carrier battles, all kinds of cool stuff, right? This is the best part of Field Commander Nimitz. Even if you have the base game, this is an awesome mechanic. I can't say enough good things about how this battle plays out. It's wonderful. It is the thing that makes Field Commander Nimitz fun. The part out here where the fleets move around, I found that to be a bit more randomish, And the thing I'm excited about is these expansions are improving on that. And so let's talk about that. So the first one here, like we said, I'm not going to be able to do a link campaign and play through the entire war. That is awesome. The next thing that it's allowing me to do is we have, instead of regular reinforcements, we now have shipyards, basic training, and assembly lines, and they can only produce so many units at a time. And we can invest some of our SPs, which is like our currency in the game. Think of it as like reinforcement points or spending points or whatever. I'm sure SP stands for something. Special points. It doesn't matter what it stands for. The point is you only have so many of them, and you can spend them to upgrade your industry and make it so you have a superior, force training or superior shipyards. And then there's even the home front morale. You could invest into improving your morale at home. And what that does is that actually lets you to speed up your production, or you start the game with delays in your production because, we got caught with our pants down when Japan attacked us, right? So this represents America, awakening after the war. And so the way this would work is if you were to produce a ship, for example, we haven't gone over what all the different numbers mean, but this is the Colorado battleship or Maryland. It costs 3 to build. So the way this would work is you'd put it on the 3 to 4 line, and then after every turn goes by, it moves down, and then eventually when it moves off the 1, it ends up on the board, and you can use it, on the game board. So this represents your production, and this here, the 2 delays, means I have to pick 2 units that are in production and not move them every turn. So if I only have 2 units in production total, then both of them won't move at all. Now there's mitigations, DVG's got all kinds of cool tricks up their sleeves with this, but I don't want to get into all those rules until we start playing, but that's the basic gist of what this expansion is. And let me get this back. Oh crap, where did I grab it from? Okay, right there. Okay, so that is the war expansion, and you can see they give you new sheets. So you're going to use these sheets instead of the base game sheets to set up your game and play it. And so that's where the real deviancy, or that's where it deviates from the base game. So it's why it's with the base game, I'm going to use this sheet right here to set up and play. But with this war expansion, I'm going to use this sheet instead. So we'll talk about the differences between those some more when we get set up going, but that's the basic idea. Okay, so that's the war expansion, and just a heads up, you get some new counters that go with it, and as you can see, I haven't even punched them yet, so we won't be doing a playthrough tonight, but I wanted to get this initial video out with some setup so you can understand. Another thing that's new is they added the concept of fortifications. So like Okinawa could have fortifications, for example, and that absorbs hits before the Japanese take hits. Makes the game a bit more challenging. The next thing that was added is the Admiral Yamamoto adversary. Okay, so what this one is it's a deck of cards, really. And so you can see here that these are the 1942 cards. So if you were playing the 1942 campaign, this is the idea that I was telling you that Kevin Verson, I was advising him. So what this is now a carrier group, and they move together as one fleet. So normally in the game, each of these 4 counters are just moving around independently of each other. And that's what I was getting at. That was my gripe with the game. So now this carrier group will always move together as one unit. And what they did was they gave me so for example, this is carrier fleet number 1 of 1942. So that would be this one right here. So this is going to be on the game board, and then these 4 tiles will be on this card, because this is representing all 4 of these And actually it's 5 because there's 2 tiles here. But so this will represent all of that, and this will always be a group. Now there's some pretty cool rules with this. Like for example, let's say I sink that carrier. Well, if the Japanese ever build a new carrier, it would replace this one. And so this carrier group will constantly get reinforced or replenished as new ships come off the Japanese line. But that's the idea. Now what they do is they have cards for every year. So you can see if you play the 1944, you're gonna have, you know, this particular group, which is a surface fleet. And in 1944, the carrier fleet would look like this. Okay, so now what's interesting is in the mode I'm gonna play, where we play from 1942 all the way to 1945, all these cards are out of the game. You don't use these. These are for when you're playing the individual years. Okay, so you just put those out of the game. The only ones you need are the 1942 ones, because as the 1943 ships get produced, they're going to replenish the losses. And so these are going to be the carrier groups and the surface groups, etc. They're going to be used throughout the whole game by Japan. Okay, I hope that makes sense. It'll definitely make sense once we start playing, but you only need the 1942. All right, so that's that particular expansion. And then the last expansion, which I didn't even realize it was in the Kickstarter. And this is an awesome expansion. So let me get this ready for you. So normally you do this sheet. Remember I told you this is the most innovative part of the game. And you do it for every battle. Well, by the time you finish just 1 year from 1942, let's say you play the 1942 campaign. By the time you finish the 1942 campaign, you'll probably have done this several dozen times. It'll feel like 100 times. I mean, you'll be exhausted at how many times you've used this to resolve battles. Well, now it's really cool because, as you can see, the Philippines is one of the places on here. They all have, you know, every place has a unique name, of course. And this is a generic island that just represented the Philippines or whatever. Well, now what they gave us is I actually have a sheet that's called the Philippines. And what you do is see how you have these lines here? You just place this right over top of the generic island. And now we have a unique island that's very thematic. And then there's special rules just for that island. This part here, this fact that there's, you know, water gaps and stuff, don't worry about any of that. That doesn't impact the game. The only thing that impacts the game is the actual rules themselves. But the rules greatly make every island feel like a different, unique type of place to do battle. You still have your ocean, you know, because that's the beauty of putting it over top. Is you still have the ocean for your carriers, but then the island itself and the coastal and island battles changes. And there's one for every place in the game. There's one for Samoa and so forth. I mean, every spot in the game has its own unique island. And I cannot say enough how cool that is. And that is the other expansion that came with the game. So now that I've covered all that, let's go over some basic things that I like to do. Like I said, sort your counters. Every counter will say on it what year it's from. So for example, that's 1942. So it'll say 42 on the top left of every counter. Okay, the ground forces and the land-based aircraft, for sure, you want to do that with. Now I did a different strategy for everything else, and I'll explain why. The ships themselves, I used a DVG tray. Like for example, these are all the 1943 carrier ships, or they should be, if I sorted this right, see? Because sometimes because the different ship types, you're looking for a specific ship type. And if I put all these in a baggie, there's actually a lot of ship counters to go through, and it's a lot harder to find them. So I just thought, you know what, it might be nicer to have all my carriers from 1943 in just one spot. And then this one here, let's see what this one is. This is 1943, all the cruisers. So, yep, every cruiser from 1943 is in this one. And you can see there's quite a few of them, which there should be. I mean, Japan had quite a big navy. And so all of these are in one spot. And I think you'll find that all the 1943s are going to be, you know, these throws, and it looks like it jumps into 1944. But anyways, you can do it any way you want. You can definitely put them in the baggies. I just found that this was a little bit easier because there are so many ships, and you're looking for specific kinds of ships, you know, when you're trying to do reinforcement charts and stuff like that, I found this to be a bit easier. So I have 2 full trays dedicated to just the ships. Okay, so let me set those aside, and then let's talk about the final tray. And this is your common components. The first thing you're going to have is you're going to have battle plans. These are U.S. battle plans. Then you're going to have Japanese battle plans. Those just, you know, need to be stored on their own. You're going to have generic battalion units. And the way this works is that's a full strength unit, and with that little red slash through the corner, those are damaged units. So, you know, full strength, lost a step, you know, if you're used to that kind of terminology. And then Americans have their own version of a generic battalion. Battalions they never change from year to year, so there's no specific year for them. Now, these ones also have a year. So this is obviously a 1945, but see this little blue strip at the bottom, right here. So basically that represents the ocean. These are carrier-based aircraft. So carrier-based aircraft versus land. See the difference? You can see the blue ocean underneath the carrier and then no blue underneath the land. So the land-based aircraft is separate from the carrier. Now, the way this game works is when a carrier is involved in battle, it always has full strength airplanes with it. And then, so if you have, like, for example, the Enterprise carrier, your sheet will tell you that, okay, the Enterprise is going to have, you know, 1 Wildcat and 1, you know, 2 of these and 1 of those. And you just take them out of here and you put them on your island battle board. So these are meant to be used for the battle, and then after the battle's over, they go back in the box. If planes get destroyed from this, they just go back in the box. Carriers always have a full complement of planes. So that's where they behave rule-wise a little different. If your land-based planes get destroyed, you have to produce new ones. You have to actually make reinforcements. That's not the case with the carrier ones. So that's why I put them in the common pool. You're going to have these are just markers to indicate number of supply points, reinforcement points. It's really just any number of anything. And in fact, we use them, it's SP. Remember I said I didn't remember what SP stood for? That's supply points. Anyways, you use these to represent how many supply points you've spent on various things. Or even you can use it for reinforcement points. This is meant, because when you're controlling the AI, you're going to move around the board and start here and then go there, and then, you know, you're going to resolve what every fleet's going to do on the board. And this is just a marker to help you keep track of which ones you've done and which ones are left to go. And the resupply, I can't remember what it's for, but it's the same kind of deal. It's just a marker you put out there to indicate that the AI did its thing. These are objective control markers. This just means that Japan controls the objective, and that means the United States controls the objective, and the objectives, of course, are different for every year. You also have some generic transport ships. For the carrier-based aircraft, you're going to see here, there's a little strip along the right side. It looks like red, white, and blue. And that shows that it's an American plane. And then, of course, the Japanese have the, the Empire Sun symbol. Now, the reason I'm pointing that out is that there are planes in the game, like this one, that's got a New Zealand or Anzac, Australia symbol. The only reason that I'm pointing that out is that the Australian planes have to remain in the Australian territories, okay? The American planes can go anywhere. The carrier-based planes are only going to be American, of course. So it's just something to point out. And then, you know, with the transports, there's, you know, you can see that this is a Japanese transport. I think there should be American transports here somewhere. I might have it somewhere else. That's okay. Oh no, I have them mixed together. That's an American transport. So I just have a transport bucket. You need these to track the strength of your airfields on each island. So your airfields can get destroyed. That can cause your planes to get destroyed. Still probably my largest gripe with those island battles. I feel like these can get destroyed way too easily, these airfields. And you'll discover that as we play, and let me know what your thoughts are. You're gonna have some counter markers that these are just used for various places on the game board. We'll get into those in a second. And there are some scouting markers that you can use. And these scouting markers cost you supply points. They can let you see where the Japanese fleet's going to move before you take your turn. And then one thing that's not included in the game are these. So I added these to the game myself, just from some supply I had. I find these to be extremely valuable because I'll explain here. So let's say this is a Japanese fleet. Let me grab this one. So let's say this Japanese fleet moved to there, right? So that carrier fleet moved. And then what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to put a move marker over top of it, which is great. That move marker is very helpful, but then I can't see what the fleet is anymore. So what I did in my brief moment of sanity is by putting that on, I can still see through it. And so those are just my move tokens, and I use those instead of the move tokens that came with the game. I definitely recommend them. I don't even know what these are called when you buy them on Amazon. I definitely bought them on Amazon. I'd have to look up what they're called, but they're like transparent tokens. They're considered game tokens. I don't know. I have some red ones, and I also have a blue one for some other purpose. And anyways, those are pretty handy. Okay, so now that we went through all the components, let's talk about setup. So I'm going to move my trays out of the way. I'm going to move this out of the way. And let's move this closer in. Okay, the game board itself, for every given year, you're going to go, you know, it's basically every turn is 2 months of the year. So you have 1 year to accomplish your objectives. And we'll talk about that some more when we get into the gameplay. But from a setup perspective, it's important to understand. And then the sequence of play is written right here on the board. And it doesn't give you any advice on what each step does, but it at least guides you through what you need to do. Okay, so in a basic standard game, you would use this setup sheet. And I'm going to very briefly go through this because this is not what we're doing for our game. This is for a basic game. So what they would say is you're going to grab all the naval forces. And so this is a light carrier, that's a battleship, cruiser, etc. You'll start to learn what these letters mean if you don't know. That's a submarine, that's a destroyer. But so there's going to be an actual game tile called the Ryujo, which is the East Asia Naval Forces. So let's take the time to find it because I'm going to need it for my game too. So it would be a 1942 Japanese. So even when you organize them, it still takes you a while to find everything. So I'm looking at 44, 43. Oh, Nelly. 45. Here we go, 42. So this is all the 1942 carriers for Japan. And they had a lot. So you just go through until you find the Ryuho, which is this one, right? So this is the light carrier mentioned here, and it says it starts in East Asia. So you would just go to the East Asia and you would just put it there. I know it looks like it's on land. If you really want to be thematic, you can do that. But what it just indicates is that they're basically docked in Asia, in the Manchuria area for now. Okay? And what you'll do is you'll go through each one of these to place them on the board. And those all go in East Asia. And then in Japan, you're going to have, from a carrier perspective, Kaga, Akagi, Soryu, Hiryu. So you're just going to go through and find them. And so, let's see, Shikaku, Zuiku. So these ones are all the light and escort ones. Interesting. So Taiyo would be in Japan. That would be this one. And because you can see that here. And then the light ones would be Hosho, Shoho, and Zuiho. So Shoho, Hosho, Zuiho. I don't know if I'm pronouncing them all right. And then these ones would, they're at least not in Japan. And then they have another one that's going to be the full-blown, here we go. These are the full-blown carriers. So there's Kaga, Hiryu, nope, that's Hiyo. Make sure your eyes are good for this game. Soryu, etc. Okay, so you get the gist. So those are going to start, like this whole giant mega stack of ships are all in Japan, like that. Okay, so they're basically all docked at home. And then as you play the game, when it's their turn to move, you would go through that stack of ships and you would roll for orders, which is here. So let's say I roll a support, or let's say a east order. That means that the fleet's going to move east. So what I would do is I would declare I'm rolling for this stack of ships. I'm going to move east. And then if I roll a 13, I'm going to go east. So let's say I did. Then what it says is that I pick 4 ships. They're going to go east. 1 infantry is going to go east, and then 2 land-based aircraft. So I would go to the stack and go 1, 2, 3, 4, and they would all move east, which is Iwo Jima. So, because that's the easternmost direction from where they were. So then I would roll again and get a new set of orders, and that new set of orders may make them go south, which would be this way, or whatever. So you have to, you would roll dice, and then that big stack of doom would move around to various places. That's how the basic game would work. And so you're setting up all of your Navy fleets, and then you're going to have reinforcements, which what this means is they go into the reinforcements pool up here. So ships, infantry, land-based aircraft, there's a separate spot for each, and then those reinforcements will come into the game later as reinforcements get called in through the rules. Okay, there's even an order here called reinforce, and so you can get reinforcements for ships, in fact, from the reinforcements pool whenever that's rolled. Okay. So then the next part is you have the infantry that would get set up in their various places, and then land-based aircraft. And then what this says here is that whenever there's a battle, the full-blown carriers are going to have a 0. Oh gosh, I think that one's the Betty. I don't remember. But basically, this should be the torpedo, and that's the dive bomber, I believe. And then the light carriers are going to have a 0 and a dive bomber, and then the escorts only have a dive bomber. I could have gotten them backwards. I apologize if I did. So then you got to go through the same thing on the U.S. side. You have, you know, everything's going to be set up. You're going to also have a reinforcements pool, and then your carrier groups are going to have, oh gosh, that's the Wildcat, and then yeah, the SBDs, which are your dive bombers, and then your torpedo bomber. And then these are the objectives for 1942, and this would be your score if you've got eight of these objectives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that means all of them you get a great score, right? That's the basic game. So we're not playing the basic game. So I apologize if you felt like you sat through a bunch of nonsense there. What we're going to do is we're doing the 1942 war expansion, total war expansion. So what you're going to see here is the same thing. You're still going to see in East Asia, you know, you need Ryujo, and then all these things get set up. You still have to go through. So all that time I just explained on the other sheet is not wasted. So you should see the same exact nomenclature here that you're going to use to set up the game. And in fact, it's the same all the way through. Let me zoom out a little bit. And in the carrier groups, I mean, that doesn't change at all. And then I don't think the objectives change. I didn't bother looking at them line by line, but that shouldn't change. But what you see missing is there's no score, because we're playing through all of the years of the war. Then, you know, so for the Japan and the Americans, you're going to have to go through and set everything up according to what the sheet says. And I would not be surprised if it's not close to identical to what the basic 1942 setup is. Because I don't think there's any reason why it should be different. Now, the one key difference is for Americans, the reinforcements. There's this reinforcement box up here. We don't use that in this game. What we use instead is we're using that. We're using this, and then the reinforcements are going to be off to the side, and we have to actually produce them, and that's going to be the big difference. So we're going to have like a big pool of ships that are available to be produced. And that's what the reinforcements do. Now, in the basic game, to get a reinforcement, you have to spend supply points to purchase the ships. That's no different than this. You're spending supply points to purchase them here as well, but it takes several turns to produce them potentially. So this is going to represent a bit more, it's a bit more involved than the basic game. Now, the other thing you're going to see is, for example, the 1942 has these little charts on the left, and then your overall evaluation. So this is your score after all 5 years, okay? Or 4 years, I apologize. So, and then a couple of things. You're going to see that there's a 1943, a 1944, and a 1945, and that's so you can actually, if you wanted to, you could just start the war expansion campaign in a future year. You don't have to start in 1942 like we are. So that's the first thing. And then the charts here aren't different. Now, what you are going to see, though, is that, okay, this box will move to here for 1943 and so forth. So one other thing is if you're playing the base game, you have this thing called supply points, which is the SP we were talking about. You get 21 every turn, okay? And you use that to purchase new ships, to repair ships, you know, things like that. Well, here, your SP is going to vary from turn to turn. So you're going to start in January and February only getting 20. But then, you know, by November and December, you're getting 22. And then in the middle months, you get 21, okay? So the amount of SP points that you get is a little different in this than the basic game. And that's what this chart here is telling you, is how many SP points you get throughout the entire war, going all the way to 1945, okay? This overall valuation is, so the way this works is, let's say we finished 1942, and we're moving to 1943. These are your 1942 objectives. You would count up how many you got, and then make a tally, just write it down somewhere. And then by the end of the game, you're going to add up what you scored here, 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 and here, and then get your overall score. So it's very similar to the basic rules in that regard. But the key difference is we now have the production model, which is added to this. And also, when we move on to 1943, you're still going to need your sheet. You can't quite call it out of the game, because the reinforcements for the Japanese do come out. They get reinforcements based on whatever the sheet says. And you can see gain 1 extra ship, 1 extra land-based aircraft during each turn's reinforcement roll. So the ships and stuff that are available in 1943, those do come out. But you may not need this sheet. That's one of the things I'm still trying to figure out. Because remember, every counter says 1943 on it. So as soon as you get to 1943, those counters come in the game. And they're available for Japan to reinforce and use. So jury is still out on whether or not you need these. I have not played a full campaign of this yet, so I can't tell you from experience. Just trying to help you to sort out in your mind what each of these does. So I don't want to bore you with going through this entire list one at a time and showing you how to set it up, but that is basically the game. Some of the special markers when you set up. So let me grab those. So, okay, first things first. These markers are for when you're in battle. They control how healthy your airports are. You know, for your land-based aircraft. So you don't need those during setup yet. Just set those in their own little spot. These are used for battle plans, and we haven't talked about those, but these are used in battles. And it basically indicates how many battle plans the Japanese get to use. My recommendation is for now, just set them here, so that way they're easily accessible and you can grab them when you need them. Same with the battle location. This is meant to be like, where are you resolving the battle? So if we're going to resolve a battle on the Gilbert Islands, I would just put that there. That's all this is. You could play the whole game without using this, but it's just a nice little marker to remind yourself where that battle was. Because remember, the battle moves to this little mini game, and those battles can take so long sometimes that you forgot where the actual battle took place. This is also used during battle. It's the battle turn. So we're going to just put all those together. And then the campaign turn would go here on start. And then the movement order, that is meant to be used here. Okay, so you just move it up and down based on what you roll. So right now we're not rolling anything, so just put it in the middle. That's really it. The setup of this is, the tedious part is going to be sorting all your pieces, and then of course going through that big sheet and making sure you get all the pieces out on the board in their respective places. That's going to take you a while. Setup, especially for your first game, may take you 30 minutes to an hour. I think once you get all your pieces sorted, it's not so bad. But it's still going to take you 15 to 20 minutes to go through that sheet and make sure you didn't screw anything up. Now, one of the things that came with the expansion is that there's new tiles or counters that we're going to be punching. One of them is going to go here. There's going to be a resupply counter that's going to go there, and just put it on a 0 for the startup of the game, and that's it. So anyways, I'm right at 43 minutes. So what I'll do is I'll set this up, and then maybe we can get to playing on video too, and then we'll talk about the rules and all that stuff then. So as always, thank you for watching, and stay awesome, stay healthy and safe.